Who told you that?
New year, new me. Same me though.
Another one.
Oh God.
You're now tuned into another episode of the ColeLogic Experience. We are doing another ColeLogic BookShare. We are on chapter 8 of, let's do what we always do, The Blackwoman's Guide to Understanding the Blackman. Shout out to the sister. Shout out to the sister. Shahrazad Ali. If you need the spelling, there you go. There you go. Ring light in the way, but y'all see. Let me turn this thing down real quick. Alrighty. Chapter 8 is the law. And 911 in parentheses. Because they don't differ. I imagine that's what you mean. Anyways. Let me get a little drinky drink first. Alrighty. Chapter 8. The Law. 911. Many black men are in constant conflict with the American legal system and the parameters of its laws. Setting the stage, consider that at the 21st Century Commission of the Status of African American Males, hosted in D.C. in the summer of 1991. I wasn't even born that, but I was on the way. Reports were made that a black male is 3 times more likely as a white male to die from a gun-related death, 11 times more likely to be killed by a gun, 5 times more likely to be arrested, 7 times more likely to be convicted, and 11 times more likely to be executed. Furthermore, in 1991, 50% of all homicide victims were a black male. This represents a 10% increase since 1981. Squeezing in between this depressing data is a government report stating that the average lifespan of black males is at its lowest in 12 years. African Americans are churning out millions in funeral and graveyard expenses to bury their male relatives prematurely. An ACLU study compiled from a report called Americans Behind Bars reveals that there are always fewer people in prison in non-white countries than in Caucasian ones. I think I gotta read that again. An ACLU study compiled a report called Americans Behind Bars reveals that there are always fewer people imprisoned in non-white countries than in Caucasian ones. Black men in America are imprisoned at a rate of 4 times more than black men in South Africa. In America, for every 100,000 black males, over 3,000 are incarcerated. In South Africa, out of the same number, only a little over 700 are jailed. The ACLU sentencing project includes in their demands government investigation of the following. 1. They seek government funding to reduce the high rate of imprisonment of black males. Number 2, they wish to establish a national commission to examine the high rate of incarceration of African American men. The American Civil Liberties Union works for the rights of citizens. This is much needed information, valuably crucial to the future of millions of black children, since over 500,000 black males are in jail, and out of that number, 70% are fathers. Woo! That was written in here. That wasn't me. The question becomes, why didn't a black male allegate these charges and pose these questions? Black men have hundreds of organizations, clubs, frats, support groups, and political platforms, and they contribute heavily to many causes. Many of them have done their best to support the Free South Africa efforts to end apartheid and numerous other global pressing issues. But not one of them have publicly come forward to organize an agenda to find out why so many black men are in jail. It's as if they don't care or don't even want to know. They are too busy addressing the concerns of their own needs and goals to give as much support to black men in prison in America as they try to give those in South Africa, which we have learned are not as bad off as the black men in America regarding prison. Black men have a consensus of opinion about black men not receiving justice in American court of laws. They say that they know that a black man cannot get justice in any court, and they say they know for a fact that black men get sentences often outweighing their crimes. But they have become so disconnected as members of the same ethnic heritage and like backgrounds that they give no thoughts to try to free or rehabilitate their own kind. This is not to suggest all black men in prison do not need to be there. Many black men require being locked up, not always so much for their crime, but because of their warped mental condition which propelled them to act out of rage of violence against innocent people. They get busted for homicide, robbery, assault, burglary, larceny, car theft, fraud, rape, sex offenses, bootlegging, etc., and etc. This is not appropriate behavior for a civilized person to engage in, and there must be some kind of method of doing something to them to protect everyone else. But as the saying goes, everybody in jail ain't guilty and everybody free ain't innocent. For whatever comfort it brings, black men are rarely recorded in history as being serial killers or mass murderers. They don't chop up people or take heads. A mass murderer kills strangers without motive cause or remorse. Let me reread that. A mass murderer kills strangers without motive, cause, or remorse. A serial killer murders periodically with time or space in between. These types of crimes are categorically committed by white males or white females. Black men don't have the heart or nature to kill in this way. Black men kill trying to rob someone or while murder. What am I reading? Excuse me. Black men kill trying to rob somebody or while under emotional stress, most likely connected to a domestic involvement. As already discussed, many times the emotional stretch they attach to a situation far outweighs the overall importance or value of the issue they are involved in. As an example, in the drug culture among gangs, they have their own set of rules and regulations, mostly pertaining to violations of their masculinity. Cultural variations of masculinity definitions are different among every nationality. The only part of masculinity the black man recognizes as expression of his maleness is aggression, more often than not misplaced. Daring to try to look at some of the reasons black men are so violent bring forth the issue of fear. Black men, especially those who are uneducated in ways to rechannel their fear or remove themselves from a negative environment, are so unsure of his own safety that he makes attack the best weapon. Psychologists say that a violent person seeks to project his rage onto others to make somebody know what it feels like. Television is guilty of legitimizing violence by referring to it as self-defense. The connection between taking drugs and violence has not yet been discovered. However, it must be pointed out that the drugs that black men used 30 years ago tended to slow them down. The drugs black men consume today speed them up. Drugs acceleration of an already fragile personality creates irritability, bad temper, sulking, verbal attacks, assaults, or murder. Drugs make a person live in a world of fantasy with distorted thoughts and patterns. Anything can happen, and usually does. Alcohol can be included in this category. It actually is the number one drug. Next, black men who steal or rob are jealous, envious, greedy, and lazy. No matter what financial need they use as a motive, they are parasitically trying to feed on the success of others. Stealing is also a perverted way for a deprived black man to achieve. He can feel good about accomplishing a goal under strenuous circumstances. They may pick someone at random who they think have something, either money or a material possession they wish to own. A black man who is the thief is the lowest caliber of man there is, because he seeks to take from those who have things he does not know how to acquire. He desires the easy way out, and he delights in the warped thrill of overpowering someone by force. Many black men steal as a profession. There are many other types of criminals in jail and on the street who rape women, molest children, abuse elders, or beat women or men. A great number of them who are confined have done a great number of them who are confined have done or perpetuate these atrocities on other black people. This is real wrong. Once in prison, after a period of adjustment, the personal crisis of coming to grips with being confined, the black man must find something to do with his time. Whatever his former status was on the street is of little value in his new environment. Status stripping is a major process in American prison. No unique identifying objects are allowed. This is part of the reason for uniforms. This is particularly difficult for black men because on the street his clothes are used to distinguish him from everybody else. After initially giving in to depression, hostility, fear, or breakdown, then they are ready to use their own time confined as best they know how. Some take GED courses, read a lot of books, lift weights, take up a vocational trade, become involved in sports, study criminal law, or they become politically astute or get religion. As soon as he recognizes that by no power of his own can he get out of jail, he gets religion. Then he turns to God for help and mostly mercy. He studies the Bible, memorizes the Quran, and if possible, becomes a born-again Christian. This is often his last resort. He becomes known for his strict religious code of behavior and impresses his family and friends on the outside with his new knowledge of God. Had they turned to God while they were free, it would have prevented them from doing the dastardly deed that landed them in prison. To get out of jail, they are willing to promise to do anything. They developed a slight brown-nosing technique with the guards to persuade them for better treatment or minute special privileges. Some of them go further into themselves and continue with their violent psychotic episodes, which sometimes end in self-mutilation or suicide. Black men in prison acknowledge that illegal substances or drugs are just as readily available in jail almost as much as they are on the street. Psychiatrists say that drug addiction is a compulsive chase of a mood change regardless of the negative aftermath. Since black men are prone to senseless searches of external means to feel better, drugs become the nerve soother of choice. They say it can be difficult, but they can maintain their habits in jail. They write long, winding letters and try to hold on to their family or woman while locked up. It is not an easy maneuver, especially since some of them receive sentences extending from 5 to 10 years until the 12th of never. Excuse me. They say living without female sex is the worst part of jail experience. Some women choose to stick by a man while he's in jail for several years. And if his woman supports him with letters, visits, books, pictures, etc., by the time he gets out, she thinks she owns him. If you decide to stick by your jailhouse man, just remember he is not going to leave one prison to be in another, yours, when he comes home. That's the deal. Oh, wait.
It's me. I'm niggas.
For some of them, it represents the only choice they think they have to survive. 3 hots in a cot. They get free food, clothing, medicine, shelter, and a bit of recreation. The only stipulation is that they have to stay inside to benefit. Prison life is an entire indoor community with guidelines and regulations established among men, separate and apart from the imposed on them from the country, state, or federal government. They learn to live by these rules if they want to survive, and they do. A black man is more pressed to exert his real masculinity when he is in prison than at any other juncture of his life. Prison forces him to follow rules of honor among men that he does not practice on the street. The rule of prison requires that a black man form allegiance with his own kind and his word becomes his bond. And if he says he's going to do a thing, he has to do it. He has to have a religious affiliation, and he better not steal anything from another inmate. And the most important of all, he better not snitch to the man or on anyone. While this is the worst place for a black man to be, manhood rules are clearly defined and expected of him. These are some of the values in a kind of honor system the black man should practice when he is free. But this is considered only a life provoked because of his confinement. There are a lot of other exaggerated regulations only known to them, many of which conceivably are not right and do not make any sense any place other than in prison. But they have a societal structure as any other segregated community in a jailhouse version of practically everything. Fighting and sex becomes the testing ground for racial power and masculinity inclusion. He has a multiple choice test in prison. He learns to defend his position in space, become a punk, or flees. The boundaries are strategically outlined for him. The path he chooses socially determines how well he survives the experience and how well he does when released back in society where the rules are drastically different. 1 second. Gotta rise my seat. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. American prisons restrain and contain some of the bravest and boldest black men ever born. Some have resided in the seclusion of prison life for upwards of 50 years. They are resigned to their restricted lives and are called old heads by the other younger inmates. In 1975, federal prisons abandoned any goals entertained about rehabilitation or social reform of incarcerated individuals. They continue to offer skills and educational programs, but they spend no time trying to decipher the minds of criminals. Excuse me. They continue to offer skills and educational programs, but they spend no time in trying to decipher the mind of criminals. State and county prisons have done likewise, and other than access to a chaplain or group rap sessions, there are no funds to supply psychiatrists or psychologists to delve in the dark shadows of a criminal mind. Overcrowding has demanded that housing and transport of violators is the major task. The number of black men in prisons is now projected to be over 700,000 by year 2000. This number includes all non-whites, Latinos, and Asians. No nation as small than the African American population can survive with almost 1 million able-bodied marrying-age men incarcerated, separated from their parents, children, and women, especially since they are not being properly prepared to re-enter society, cured of their confusions. After release, they are admitted to halfway houses where they are monitored, herded, and restricted, and treated like immature children. Sadly, by the time many of them are incapable of functioning independently as responsible adults, a man who has not been required to work consistently, pay living expenses, and organize his own time is little able to hit the streets and explode into success. Then there are drugs. Black men with addictive personalities find it difficult to live without this artificial stimulation. Black men on drugs will never give up the desire for drugs permanently by finding Jesus, step programs, or being shut away in rehab centers maintained on medication. They go through these programs over and over, and the programs are costly. Black men will kick drugs when they take on a new idea about themselves. The best idea would be for them to return to their own religions and names and the real aims and purpose of their lives. Only by complete rejection of their previous life and activities will they overcome. But after abandoning their former criminal or crime-ridden lifestyles, they must be offered something else to replace it with. One second. An entire program for daily living and daily thinking. They must be given reason and ways to monitor themselves without the great white father peering over their shoulder. They have to be motivated from within due to gaining a new value for their existence and a new purpose for their survival. Only one group has ever been able to rehabilitate black men off drugs and provide them with a successful, productive, masculine existence. This was done by giving them new information and training them on the value for self. The constant availability of cheap sources and odd mixtures of mind-altering drugs available to the black man right outside his door creates a serious problem for the black community and the black family. The HIV and AIDS threat has shoved the crack cocaine, heroin, and ice and amphetamine problems to the back burner. But black men in increasing numbers are opting for the quick fix, the easy thrill of consuming or selling drugs. Crack is such a low-grade, desperate high that wears off so fast that it keeps the user involved in perpetual activity to replenish the supply. Black men give up every civilized standard and value when they sink into the brutal caverns of crack cocaine, a cheap, low-cost, short-lived high. It is an accelerated artificial chemical dependency that remains uncontrollable and unreachable by rehab or detox. There is no methadone type substitute for crack. The rehab fail rate continues to be higher for crack than any other drug stimulant. Drug officials recognize the futility of trying to get users off of crack based on mounds of disappointing case studies. No solution has been found regarding what to do with crack addicts. Interest has dwindled. Black women complain that when their man gets out of jail or prison after doing a couple of years or more, they seem to want to talk about what happened while incarcerated for several months after their release. Apparently, this is part of the disengagement, the come down, a subsiding of the pressure Apparently, this is part of the disengagement, the come down, a subsiding of the pressure inherent in confinement. They must talk themselves out of the experience like confession to relieve themselves. They should be open and talk about the pains, anything that pains them. A bleak period of depression follows their release, and others more accustomed to being institutionalized, speak of prisons somewhat longingly. Overcrowding in prisons prevent any rehab from occurring, and budgets are directed towards bunks and food. Black men are reduced to a near animal level if held in segregation or solitary confinement too long. The longer he is in prison, the longer it takes for him to readjust to lightly monitored freedom. There is really no way for them to keep up socially, politically, or academically in prison. They are in a vacuum. But prison can be a place of reflection for a black man, and if he does not have to constantly be on guard against physical attacks from other inmates, it is a period in his life when he no longer deny his failure to cope with daily living. They are remorseful or vindictive, swearing to walk a chalk line when released, or concentrate on how to improve their illegal activities. They often develop lifelong friendships with other black men who did time with them, and although discouraged from further association from other ex-offenders, they seek out contact when possible. The rules regarding disassociation are unreasonable, but enforced. They say they are victimized by police harassment, unwarranted shakedowns, brutality, agitation, and disrespect for their manhood by police officers on the street. They say they are roughed up or beaten and terrorized just for sometimes walking the streets. They say the police are against all black men and enjoy picking on them to stir reactions so they will be justified in beating or killing them. He goes against the legal system full force, but as soon as he gets busted, he then calls upon that same system for compassion while trying to find a loophole in the rules to exonerate himself. When this fails, he screams racism. If he succeeds at his crime, he says nothing and continues. But racism is his catch-all. In many parts of Africa, the laws broken in America that earn separation from society by jail would generate an immediate death sentence, especially if the crime involved breaking the peace of another tribal member by violation of his God-given rights to exist. Instant death as punishment for crime was a major deterrent. Of course, this is only done if the person was proven guilty on all counts undeniably. Swift death is merciful, but it is not profitable. Maintenance of prison is. Even the death sentence has not proven to be a deterrent to crime, and there are always more black men on death row than any other nationality. A death among African American men would only serve to remove more able-bodied men, because if 50,000 were killed, then 50,000 others would have to die. Areas in the far west California resemble Beirut war zones, disaster areas where black men individually or in a gang stalk each other day and night. Yes, black men feel powerless and helpless to do anything but talk about racism inherent in such occurrence. But he feels so helpless because he is waiting on some outside entity other than himself to produce a remedy for these situations. He keeps pleading with the government to do something about it, to intervene on his behalf and solve the problems of the black men says they created. But it hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen. What now? Does he just watch all this go down, or does he get on the case? Throwing a fit in the form of a half-baked revolution against American society will not help. But the natives are getting restless again. Where clouds are brewing and rumbling can be heard penetrating the atmosphere of urban areas. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 8, titled The Law, or 911. And as a few of these chapters have had some questions in regarding to the next chapter. And the questions are as such. Who is your God? Allah, Christ, Jesus, Jehovah, Jah, Ra, Yahweh, Buddha, Holy Spirit. Are you Muslim? Are you Jew? Are you Christian? Do you read the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran? Is Islam your religion? Is Christianity your religion? Is Judaism your religion? Is Buddhism your religion? Do you need a Savior, the Lord, or a Creator? And how do you know? And that, my friends, will lead us into chapter 9, religion. I do thank you guys for tuning in to the ColeLogic experience. Again, scrolling across the bottom if you're watching YouTube. If not, I'll read my Cash App tag, Cole, C-O-L-E 1212, or my Venmo at UniverCole, UNIVERCOLE. And for my other links, contact solo.to/ColeLogicX. And that is the end of this ColeLogic experience. Thank you for tuning in.
And what about it, nigga?
Man, what did he do to make them niggas that mad? This is a sick Negro.
So I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm gonna do something that's only gonna benefit black people. No.
Donation. Yes.
You know you can go to jail for that shit, huh? What? Riding nigga dick with no license?